Welcome to a slow, beginner-friendly lesson on reading and writing CSV and Python, made for absolute beginners. The Data Tools section. In the previous lesson you learned what CSV is. Today we use it in Python. You will import the built-in CSV library, open a CSV file, read its rows one at a time, and write new rows back out. The good news, everything you learned about dictionaries in Phase 0.5 comes straight back. The CSV library can hand you each row as a dictionary, keyed by the header. By the end of this lesson you can do a full round trip, read a file, process it, write a new file, in about 10 lines of Python. The built-in way. Start with the best news. The CSV library is built into Python. You do not run pip install, you do not need UV to add a package. You just write import CSV and you have everything. The library handles the quoting rules we talked about last lesson, commas inside values, double quotes, new lines, all automatic. And it works the same on Mac OS, Linux, and Windows, so the code you write today runs anywhere Python runs. No install needed. Python ships with a CSV library. No install, no download. You import it and you are ready to move tabular data. Tools already on the shelf. Here are the first two lines of any CSV reading code. Import CSV. Then open the file with the familiar with open statement you learned earlier in Phase 0.6. Inside the with block, you create a reader by calling csv.reader and passing the open file f. That reader is a cursor, it walks through the file one row at a time. You have not read any rows yet. You have just prepared the tool that will read them. 2 lines, that is all. Put the pieces together. Inside the with block you create the reader, then loop over it with a for loop. Each iteration, the reader hands you one row as a list of strings. The first row is the header, name, age, city. The next row is Ada, 36, London. Notice that ages come back as strings, not integers. CSV is plain text, so every field is a string until you convert it. We will do that conversion in a moment. Loop and read. Here is the shape of a real CSV script. You open the input file and create a reader. You walk through the rows one by one, processing each, filtering, converting, transforming. For each row you want to keep, you hand it to a writer that sends it to the output file. Read, process, write. That is the loop. Almost every CSV script in the wild follows this shape, and by the end of this lesson you will have written it yourself. Read, process, write. When you loop over a reader, each row is a list of strings. You index it by position, just like any list. Row square brackets 0 is the first field. Row square brackets 1 is the second field. If you do not want the header in your loop, you can call next on the reader once before the loop, which consumes the header row and moves the cursor past it. Then the loop starts cleanly at the first data row. Walk one row at a time. Let us look closely at one row. The file has columns name, age, city. The reader hands you the row as a list with 3 strings. Row index 0 is Ada. Row index 1 is the string 36, in quotes, because CSV is plain text. Row index 2 is London. If you need the age as a number, you call it on row index 1. This conversion is your responsibility. The CSV library gives you strings, you turn them into whatever type you need. Strings until you convert. Each row in the file becomes a value you can use in code. The bridge between file and program is just one function call. Rows become values. Here is where dictionaries come back. Instead of csv.reader, use csv.dictReader. It does the same job, but each row comes to you as a dictionary, not a list. The keys come from the header row automatically. So you can write row square brackets name and row square brackets age. No more counting from 0. The code reads like English, and renaming a column in the file is much easier to follow than renumbering positions. Dictionaries are back. Look at how readable this is. You read the header once and then use the column names everywhere. Name equals row square brackets name. City equals row square brackets city. Then you print an F string, name lives in city. If you ever change the file to put city before name, this code still works, because you access by name, not by position. That is the everyday advantage of dictReader, and why most working Python programmers reach for it first. Read it like English. When do you use plain reader versus dictReader? Plain reader gives you a list, access by position, row index 0, row index 1. That is fine when the file has no header or when columns are not stable. dictReader gives you a dictionary, access by name, row square brackets name. It is more readable and more robust to column reordering. For everyday work, default to dictReader. Reach for plain reader only when you have a specific reason. Default to dictReader. A common question, how do you skip the header row? With plain CSV.reader, you call next on the reader once before the loop, that consumes the header and moves on. With dict_reader you do nothing, the header is consumed automatically and used as the dictionary keys. This is another small win for dict_reader. Less ceremony, less room for mistakes, and the header does its real job, naming the columns instead of being thrown away. Let the header do its job. What you compute, you can save. Writing rows back out closes the loop and turns your script into a real data tool. Save what you compute. Now let us write. Open a file in write mode, that is the W as the second argument. Notice the new line equals empty string argument. We will explain that gotcha in a moment, for now, just include it. Inside the with block, create a writer with csv.writer, passing the file. Then call writer.writeRow with a list of values. Each call writes one row. The first call here writes the header. The second writes Ada, 36. Open once, write many. Each call to writer.writeRow adds one line to the file. You pass it a list, the CSV library handles the commas, the quoting, the new line at the end. You do not join strings by hand. You do not worry about commas inside values. The writer knows the rules and applies them. 3 calls, 3 rows written. The output file grows one line at a time. 1 call, 1 row. When you have many rows to write, call writer.writeRows with a list of lists. 1 call writes them all. This is handy when you have collected your output in memory first, for example, after filtering rows from another file. Build the list of rows, open the output once, and write them in a single batch. Cleaner code, and slightly faster because the file is opened only once. Batch the writes. Here is the gotcha we promised. When you open a file for writing CSV, always pass new line equals empty string. Why? Because the CSV library writes its own new lines at the end of each row. If Python also translates new lines, which it does by default on Windows, you end up with double blank lines between rows. Passing new line equals empty string tells Python, do not touch the new lines, the CSV library will handle them. Make it a habit. It costs nothing on Mac OS or Linux and saves real bugs on Windows. Mind the new lines. Just like there is a dict_reader, there is a dict_writer. You give it the list of column names up front, those are the field names. Call write_header to write the header row. Then call write_row with a dictionary. The writer matches each key to its column and writes the values in the right order. If you have a list of dictionaries, use write_rows to write them all in one call. This pairs perfectly with dict_reader, read dictionaries in, write dictionaries out. Write dictionaries back out. Let us tie it together with a practical example. You have a contact CSV and you want to print every name. Import CSV. Open the file. Create a dict_reader. Loop over it. Print row square brackets name. 5 lines of code, and you have walked an entire file. This is the exact pattern you will use again and again. Read a CSV, pull out the fields you care about, do something with them. Everything else in this lesson is a variation on this small core. 5 real lines. Quick self-check. Can you write the 5 lines that read a CSV and print every name? Can you explain why dict_reader gives you a dictionary instead of a list? Can you write the 3 lines that open a file for writing and add 1 row? And can you remember the new line equals empty string argument when writing? If any of those feels shaky, rewind the matching code and type it out yourself in IPython. Reading code is good. Typing it is better. Type it yourself. Here is the lesson in one breath. Import CSV. Read with dict_reader to get each row as a dictionary, keyed by the header. Write with csv.writer or dict_writer, 1 row per call. Always pass new line equals empty string when opening a file for writing. That is the full round trip. 5 lines to read, 3 lines to write, and you have a real data tool. Read and write, full circle. Next lesson we step out one level. So far you have opened one file by name. In real projects you often need to find files, every CSV in a folder, every .py file in a project. Python's pathlib library makes that easy. You will list files, filter by extension, and combine that with what you learned today to process many CSV files in one run. That is the next step toward real data scripts. Folders come next. Thanks for learning to read and write CSV. Next we list files in folders with pathlib. The Data Tools section.